November 2016. So we're just going to get straight into it. And what are we going to do? We're going to review last week's meeting. So we talked about consider folding the TSC into the CTC. That was a productive discussion, and I posted notes yesterday to that issue with my suggestion for a way forward. We'll talk about that briefly again today. We skipped over revised membership rules because James wasn't here, and I think we're going to have to do the same this week again. And we talked about NVM, and we're going to deal with that straight up in this meeting. So without further ado, let's go into that topic. So in VM and investigate moving it into the foundation, what we did was set up a repository called version management, I think it was, and there's been some productive discussion and meetings in there with a fairly broad group, I believe, but we have a report from that group now. So I think, I guess it's Jason Ginchero from Microsoft has joined us to help us understand what's going on there. So Jason or Josh or someone else want to take it away and tell us what's going on there?
Just before that, Michael, could you actually tweet it, please? Thanks.
Yes, okay.
This is Jason here. So we met a couple of days ago on a conference call. We had representatives from I think 4 or 5 of the various version manager tools, plus some other interested people. I posted the notes in our repo, but I'll summarize for the group here. So we are in general agreement that we should work together to kind of define standards for version management, which would probably consist of requirements for how node versions are cached and installed, along with extensions for the various switching mechanisms, which are kind of optional. I think the working group does not agree yet whether that should lead into us collaborating on building a single tool that we all work together on and trying to converge all these various efforts into a single combined effort. Some people are very invested in their particular solutions. I think they may want to continue that, but other people think that we can work together to build a single solution, which may be possibly appropriate for bundling with Node or Node installer. We also talked about the adoption of MVM into the foundation, or the proposed adoption. I think nobody in the working group is strongly opposed to that, but there's still some questions and concerns about the perception there. And it's not clear that it would have long-term benefits to anybody beyond the MVM project itself. And based on the other discussion, it seems like MVM as it is today probably doesn't have an extended future, since we were more likely to focus on a cross-platform solution. Any questions about that?
Okay, so there is a rough consensus that NVM will probably be phased out for a new solution?
Possible, or it's possible that we may stop at just kind of defining those standards and allowing an ecosystem of tools to continue to exist around that, but in a more consistent and more interoperable way.
Okay.
So I think the real question of whether or not, I think that actually, so we should reframe the question about MVM, which is, should it go into the Node Foundation or into the JS Foundation? Because the JS Foundation could be a home for it as well. I think that if this group of people think that there is like a really positive strategic interest in having it in the Node Foundation, then we can explore that. But if not, if it just kind of needs a neutral home for the reason that any package needs a neutral home, it should probably just go to the JS Foundation. And we can help make that happen too.
So Jordan, Jordan talked about that briefly, about the JS Foundation. He was thinking that was probably less appropriate because actually the tool doesn't even have any JS code in it, although it's associated with JavaScript because it's associated with Node. But MVM itself is all shell scripts. But he thought that the Node Foundation was a much better fit.
I mean, it's a better fit if it's in strategic interest for that group, but I think that if it's just a general tool for Node developers and it needs a home, could probably go into the JS Foundation. And the JS Foundation, I think, is pretty open about, projects that are positive to the ecosystem, even if they're in other languages, are probably fine.
Yeah, I think what we need is simply just a proposal for moving forward. And Jordan's in that group, so I trust that he'll be pursuing the interests of NVM. So if we hear back a case for moving the NVM into the foundation, and it's a case that involves that is wrapped up in a strategic future around version management, then I think that we're much more likely to be able to consider it. It's just that simply that when we're missing that case, what is this part of that is it's not just an isolated, let's bring this one thing in, but it's part of a more strategic direction around that whole area that includes an ecosystem. So if that case can be made, I think I don't see it being hard to do. It's just that case does need to be made. So
right, and I think as I said, I think we still don't have clarity on what the strategic direction is, whether it is an ecosystem of tools or whether it should be rather a combined converged tool.
And do you see that the group is moving in that direction and it's positive progress so far, or do you think, are you concerned that it might end up being a circular discussion?
I'm not sure yet. I think how it's going to proceed at this point is we'll work on kind of defining the requirements and standards for version management, and then perhaps based on what we settle on there, we can think about whether a single solution might meet everybody's requirements, or whether it might be more appropriate to allow different tools to innovate or focus on more specific scenarios or platforms.
Okay, so we'll just let that continue and then receive updates from it and see how we go from there. Hey?
I do have one quick question about NVM. Is there a need for them to go into a foundation soon? Like, is there a time constraint on NVM's end?
I am not aware of any particular time constraint, but Jordan is a better person to answer that.
That might be useful to know, especially if, there's a couple of possibilities that we could do here. We could decide that, NVM becomes obsolete, or maybe the basis of some new tool that's worked on, that's one possibility, in which case, having NVM itself in a foundation isn't very useful. But, there are other scenarios where NVM may need to be in a foundation. And so, like, thinking about, with the JS Foundation specifically, if they need to get in a foundation soon because, say the project is, struggling with not being in a foundation or something like that, then maybe that makes sense as a temporary measure. It'd be nice to know if there was, a constraint that way, like, there's a pressure to get them into a foundation soon or not. I mean, I didn't think there was either, but might be good to clarify.
I think a good thing to note here too is that the JS Foundation has a right to leave baked into their bylaws. So if a project decides that it wants to leave that foundation for another one, they can. So if you needed a temporary stopgap, and it wouldn't necessarily mean that it could never come into the Node Foundation. Just FYI.
I wanted to mention one thing. Jason kind of focused on the point how we will move forward with the version management discussion. And Rod, you kind of brought up, and Michael too, the underlying assumption there, which is that we would want version management in core. There is a document, that initial proposal that we shared a couple weeks ago, and you didn't mention it, Jason, but is there was there consensus that the reasons that are given there, why it would benefit our developers, why it should be in core, does the group generally agree with that stuff? And I posted a link to it in the chat bar here.
So the version management working group had not discussed that particular question. Are you asking for us to answer that, or are you looking for guidance from the TSC?
I think the TSC is kind of looking for guidance from you folks, and I wrote this up because I think this is what we think. We're talking with you and talking with Jordan, and I just want to verify that that's true. And if that is, then that might help answer Rod and Michael's concerns. And then we know that version management as a domain does belong under the foundation. We know that the next step is to work on the conventions and the APIs and stuff that you guys are working on now. And then the only question that will remain is in a month or two when we do have those conventions, whether we bring in a particular implementation or not. So so I guess I'm looking for that. Do we have consensus on the foundational reasoning? And maybe we need to just verify that with the group.
I think the group was started with the assumption that version management is very important to Node, and there has been a lot of discussion about related to the installer, that an installer should build on top of a version manager or multiple version manager tools, and the installer is part of the Node Foundation. Now the foundation membership of one or more tools is kind of a separate question, though, because there's precedent for Node depending on things that are not in the foundation.
Yeah, look, I think all we need really is to know that this group is pursuing these questions, and that there is enough interest and activity there to trust that it's going to pursue them with a very strategic head. And then it's up to the TSC to really empower that group to do that and to start making those cases around core. So it's not up to the TSC to agree or disagree whether version management belongs in Node core. That's going to be a case for this group to make to the CTC. So the TSC is really the domain of our decision making here is simply what groups do we empower and what projects do we bring in. So that's really, I think, so empowering this group it seems like it's a positive thing. To maybe it needs to become a working group, and then knowing that it has this strategic direction that it's pursuing. I think if that group were to come back and say, look, we think that that NVM should come in and it should come in under these conditions and whatever, I think that would be really easy to do once the TSC knew that this domain was being taken care of, or at least looked at by a separate group. But the fact that until now it's been up to the TSC to think about that. So the proposal for NVM has come in. TSC has had to think about this whole thing from a strategic perspective. That's too hard. So knowing that there's another group that is concerned about that and is actually making good progress, if that case would have been made about actually bringing NVM in, I think it would be much easier for the TSC to just sign off on that and say, okay, well, if you think that's the way to go, and it's going to be looked after, then go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the group kind of wants a little bit of like a blessing or kind of a go forward from the TSC. And I'll just say that, like, in all of our discussions about this, nobody has really objected to the idea that this is very important for users, that almost all of our users use something like this in order to manage their versions. This is an important enough topic for the foundation to take on. I don't think that anybody's really objected to that principle. I think that the real open question that Rob's trying to get at is, are the right people going to come in and drive this and maintain a sustainable group working on this kind of activity under the foundation? And as long as like the CTC and the TSC see that and that the right people are there and that it's sustainable and continuing, the TSC and the CTC will take any of their recommendations and most likely go with them without a huge amount of pushback, because those people are the experts on version management, and we've sort of already decided that version management is an important topic.
With all this discussion going on, I think it'd be pertinent to at least mention it to the board. The wording in issue 144 that we'll talk about here in a bit says that any new things will be run by the board. And maybe this isn't happening yet, or maybe it will happen, but it's all about keeping them in the loop. And who knows, maybe the board would be like, yeah, we don't want to put resources into that, like whatever they might say.
I did already give the board a heads up that we were looking at this, that we had a request come in and we were taking it seriously. So the board has a initial heads up, but yeah, I think you're right. Giving them a more detailed rundown on what the current progress is would be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last update was pretty NVM central, and now that we've sort of broken it into a more general version management question, we should update them again. We have a meeting in a little over a week and a half, so I'll get that into the deck.
I think somewhere in there, Jordan is looking for an answer to whether the Node Foundation is willing to take on the governance and then own the bugs and issues and all that stuff that comes in, and essentially take it off of his shoulders. And so I guess it's kind of an open question out there on its own, that he's still going to keep wanting some sort of nudge on.
I mean, governance is handled by the working groups, though. I mean, the people that run that group are going to have to, drive the decision making and all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's not a ton that we can do other than just kind of support you, give advice, a baseline of resources and stuff like that. We can't really we don't want to step in and make decisions for another group, because that group is empowered to be the experts on that particular area.
Yeah, precisely. And look, my impression from Jordan is that he's happy with the progress so far, and that if this group sees a strategic direction that involves coming up with some new solution, then he's more than happy for NVM to be retired, if that's the way to go. And I think that as long as he's in that discussion, then the things that come up from that group will be taken seriously by the TSC. And if moving NVM is urgent, then he just needs to let us know, and we'll see if that can be factored in. But the more that comes from that group to us, the better, so that we don't have to be the experts.
So ultimately, does this particular issue that the agenda item right now, does that stay open and remain as we're considering bringing it in, or does it go closed and there's now a working group that has been delegated to?
I don't think we're quite at that stage, but I think we're about to get there. That's my impression. So if this group want,
go ahead. Yeah.
If this group wants to become a working group and it looks like there's a future there. So if I guess what we want to hear from this group is there a future together, or is this just a one-time, let's look at this thing and then move back to our respective areas? But if there's a future together as a working group, then I think the TSC will empower that, and then that particular question will be shunted over to them and say, okay, there's this question on the table, can you make a recommendation to us? But until then, that question's still live, unless Jordan wants to take it off the table.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably just say that that issue can be closed if that working group thinks that it can be closed.
Right.
Like it has a lot of important context in it. If that group decides to kick it back to the TSC and say, you know what, we're not going to do much over here, and you should make the decision outside of that. But that context isn't all that important if you're taking on all of this work in another working group and moving forward from there. So.
Okay, that thread can just be updated with that bit of information, and all good.
Are you volunteering to do that?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm okay with keeping that on the agenda, the TSC agenda tag, so that we can get updates. Is there another meeting planned for that group, or is it just a lot of stuff happening on GitHub?
There's not another meeting planned yet, but I expect we will meet again at some point.
Yeah, Jordan had said this was really great. He ended the last meeting with, "This is really great. Let's meet again in a couple weeks." So the intention is there.
Okay, maybe we should remove it from the agenda then. Just leave the issue open and remove it from the agenda.
I would agree with that.
Same here.
Okay. So moving on. Thanks for that, Jason. That's very helpful. The travel fund thing. So that's the next agenda item, issue number 174 in the TSC repo. So that call went out to collaborators. Did it go out in that issue? Where did it go out?
I think I saw another thread with it at some point. I don't know. Is Michael Dawson on the line? Maybe he can tell us.
No, he's not.
I saw the issue for it. It's like a separate issue somewhere. I don't know if it's on the CTC repo or TSC. I think it was just on the TSC repo, but maybe it's not. Maybe it was posted somewhere else.
Maybe it's in the Node repo.
I think it was in the Node repo. I remember saying that too.
It's not in the Node repo. Okay, so my question was whether we'd had any responses for that.
So Miles opened a few different issues, one in the Node repo, one in the build repo and one in the Node.js org repo.
I've just found it. It's issue number 166 in the TSC repo. So Michael opened a new one and pinged collaborators, and there has been no response so far.
It is like a week until the conference, and during that week is Thanksgiving in the US. So I'm not too surprised.
So the Node.js collaborators group was pinged with that. Anyone got any suggestions for raising the visibility of that, because it's getting a bit too late?
We could send an email out to at least the CTC, get more visibility. The CTC email address, that is. I don't know, might help.
I guess we have the email addresses of collaborators, so
You just email everyone, technically. I mean,
yeah.
someone would need to go do that, but
I think at least it's the one time that people would be happy that you're emailing them.
Okay, so let me just look at this email list. Maybe I'll send out an email to that list, and yeah, that shouldn't be hard to do. I'll send out an email to everyone on the Node.js node README and point them to that issue and say time is running out if you need to get in. Okay, that's fine. So the next one is issue number 146, which is consider folding the TSC and the CTC. I posted a long follow-up there that was only yesterday, so I'm not surprised there's no responses to that so far. I summed up a lot of what we discussed last week. We came to some really good conclusions last week, I thought. So I've asked for anyone that has outstanding concerns here that can actually clarify what the problem is that would be solved by merging the two groups. So without a clear problem statement, we can't move forward. That's pretty much what we've decided here. So we're still open to having that problem statement. I posted about a summary of the status quo and how we got here, a bit of the history, and also how we're working at the moment and how we're a little bit stalled on membership in particular. And then I proposed a way forward, and I'll just quickly summarize that. So for moving forward, first of all, finish up defining node core, which is issue number 144. And as William said yesterday, that I should finish that up. It would have been good to have that done for this meeting, but I'll try and get it done before Node Interactive so that we can present it to the board. So we'll have to do that asynchronously, and we've done most of the work there anyway. So it's just a matter of taking care of the nits and reframing it for the README. And once we've solved that, then we can look at how we should adjust the whole charter and our governing rules so that we remove the whole concept of the umbrella program thing and make it more clear what's going on. And I've put in some items that we should clarify within that, and one is that the assertion that we came up with last week that the TSC exists to serve the CTC and the other top level groups under it, just as the board exists to serve the technical group. So make it very clear that the TSC is not the peak group. It just happens to be the top of the reporting chain. It exists to serve the activity that happens elsewhere. That the TSC exists to facilitate multiple projects that don't have clear overlap. So that's why there might be multiple top level groups under the CTC, but the focus is on Node Core. The TSC's responsibilities are purely administrative and don't extend to technical decisions within Node Core or the other technical groups that exist. The TSC's administrative responsibilities exist as a function of serving the CTC and its other top level groups. So I just wanted to, I don't know how you say that in formal language, but basically the TSC is not self-serving. It exists to serve the other groups. And its administrative stuff is not, it doesn't exist to perpetuate its own existence. And then the third step beyond that, and once we come up with some new governing rules, is to figure out membership rules so that we can move forward with that. And that would be empowering people who want to work on this stuff but don't necessarily want to get heavily involved in technical work. So how do we raise them up and make them visible and bring them onto the TSC if they're not coming up through that collaborator pathway in Node Core? And then figure out, provide how we can connect with the CTC to solve some of the accountability and alignment concerns. So there's been a bunch of ideas that have been floated about how we can make membership between those two groups a little bit more overlapping. So that's my proposal for moving forward. I suspect the biggest part of that is that new governing rules, which could get stalled. So my fear is that we would end up deferring the membership stuff for too long. So we might want to think about how we can combine those two steps into one and just get the membership stuff figured out ASAP, so that we don't have this awkward situation we have now. So that's that was my post there. I think we can take it off the agenda unless someone comes back with a clearer problem statement, and we can just move forward because this is the direction we're heading anyway, by default.
Do we need a final okay on that from the TSC, or is it all just all good, all clarified and okayed?
Well, this is reflecting the consensus that we were having last week about this issue. Basically, the consensus with regard to decision making on the issue was simply that we don't believe that the case has been made here for actually taking any action, and it would be irresponsible of us to take action without having a clear problem statement. So with a lack of that, we can't move forward. So we'd like anyone that can make that case to please make it. So that's the case for removing this from the agenda.
Okay, sounds good to me.
And the other stuff is really what we're doing anyway. The next step stuff. Any comments on that before we just roll on?
Yeah, I think that makes sense so far. Yeah, I'll definitely take some time and read through it, kind of sit on it, think on it. But yeah, I think this makes sense, especially for some good next solid steps.
Okay, I'm just taking some notes here. Wow, Google Docs has got some weird new feature about action items. Suggested action item. Do you want to assign this to you? Okay. So the next one is the defining Node Core. Issue number 144. Again, there's been no movement on that except for a suggestion that we get that tied up before Node Interactive so that we can present that to the board. So that would mean dealing with that asynchronously, and since we won't have a meeting before then. So I guess I'll try and work on that today and tomorrow. I've got a bunch on my plate, but I'll try and prioritize that and ping everyone for moving forward and get it in front of the board and get it off our plate. How does that sound?
It sounds great. That would be awesome if we could get this in place before Node Interactive. Yeah, and last time it's been a while since I've looked at that PR, but last time I looked at it, it was, there's some good comments in there, but I think overall it looked like it was pretty solid and pretty close.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, and lastly was the revised membership rules. This is wrapped up in the previous discussion, but also James is not here, so oh no, James is here. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, I'm here. I just joined. I'm late.
So we were just talking about the whole TSC and CTC question. I don't know if you heard any of that, James, but that did talk a bit about membership rules. But is this membership rule something you want to prioritize now, or do you want to have a discussion on this, or do you want to punt it?
No, we can punt it until we get together. The two group conversation figured out. It's not a high priority. It was just kind of just try to get a little bit of clarity around it. Very happy to punt it down the road.
I think like we probably shouldn't take too long to do something like this, but
Yeah, I feel like we're blocked by simply our uncertainty around our structure and why we exist. And that's the highest priority, get that figured out, and then we can move forward on all of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I don't see it as a huge priority. It shouldn't take too long to get worked out once we do have the structural stuff figured out. I'm not sure how much is actually controversial in there. So.
It's been a little while since I had my head in there, but look, James, if you think it's not that big a deal, not that much of a change, then maybe we can vote on it in the issue if you want to try and do that. Or
Yep,
if it's not that important, then you can maybe if you want it to come to a vote, how about you set a timeline for that? So if you want it to be voted on here at a meeting, then let's do that. If you want to do it asynchronously in there, then just suggest that as well.
all right, sounds good.
Okay, so the last question before we have some Q&A from anyone that's tuned in is regarding our next meeting, because we're overlapping with Node Interactive in 2 weeks. So I don't Node Interactive, I think, is Tuesday and Wednesday, is it? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
It's Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the Code and Learning Collaboration Summit are Thursday,
Okay.
Friday.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I just wanted to mention we took off the NVM items, so the next meeting will be, assuming no new things roll in, would just be about the TSC and CTC stuff, which may not be the best thing. Maybe it is a good thing to do there. I don't know, but just mentioning that.
Who on this call is not going to be at Node Interactive? William, Josh, Brian, you're going to be there?
Yes, sir.
I will indeed.
Yes. Speaking.
Okay, and Jeremiah is now joining us as well. Michael and James will be there.
I'm thinking about skipping it myself, but no,
Yeah, okay, that makes
I
tons of
definitely
sense.
can't skip it.
Michael Dawson will be there. Anyone know? Is Rich Trott going to? Oh yeah, Rich Trott. We approved funding for that.
Yep.
So look, we're going to have pretty much the full complement there. So we should do a meeting there.
And Rod, I was
agreed.
just updating an issue earlier, but that Monday we'll be able to confirm space if y'all want a space specifically for that too.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to do like in front of a lot of people, because it's like this kind of stuff is really just tedious. So how about we just find a room and yeah.
You know, if we, you know what, we could probably do with some more informal discussion among the TSC and people, just to work some stuff out. So maybe a dinner on Thursday or something, because Thursday's our normal day anyway, and that's the Collab Summit stuff. So we don't have any meals planned yet by the conference for dinner, at least.
For me.
Sorry, what time was that?
It would be dinner on Thursday. So we'd basically leave the venue and get dinner somewhere. I can get us a reservation once you give me a count.
Okay.
But yeah, so it would be like 6 or 7 p.m. on Thursday.
I can get behind that. Something else we might consider doing is extending an invitation to any of the CTC members who want to join. Just kind of see what the TSC meetings are like. But with dinner also is sort of the extra little carrot, so they're not just sitting through a boring meeting.
That's not the same. Oh no, sorry, my calendar's the day. So the board meeting one is the day before that, isn't it?
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
The board dinner is Wednesday. The board meeting is Tuesday.
Okay, that sounds fine. Post an issue to collect a list of people who can be there. Let me do that now. Start that. Okay.
Are we talking about having the normal scheduled meeting where we go over agenda and all that at its normal time, and then additionally a dinner, or the meeting then is deferred to the dinner? I'm unsure.
So
We can get the boring stuff out of the way.
I actually think that the boring stuff we're going to have to deal with asynchronously anyway. So we've moved the C2C TSC combining thing off the agenda. NVM thing we've pushed back to that group. The charter rules we've said we will do that asynchronously, and it's not that vital anyway. The defining node core thing we need to do before the board meeting. So we really don't have that much stuff to deal with anyway. That's urgent. So I think maybe we just skip the meeting and have an informal dinner. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good. I'd just ask to notify people early that the live broadcast wouldn't be done. I can take it off the calendar, of course.
Sure. We have a calendar, do we?
I have a calendar that I share with it's a public calendar that I keep maintained as a stopgap until we figure out something more official. I'm welcome to share with anybody else. Josh is already an administrator of it.
Yes, please. I'd like to get that on my calendar because some of these meetings are a bit crazy.
the CPC ones are a bit hard to follow now, yes.
So
I'd appreciate that too.
Yeah, I would too. I've missed a lot of these meetings observing because I can't keep track of when it's been moved to.
Yeah, that was actually exactly why I was late today. Couldn't keep track of time zone, so definitely would appreciate it.
Let me get you guys the link, unless you have it, William. I posted it yesterday in the CTC one. So let me find it.
Yeah, you'll probably find it before I do.
So I missed a little bit of that because I don't know, my laptop crashed or something. If we're just doing it informal though, like what's the reason we're not just doing it with both groups?
Well, we are. I'll say it's a TSC dinner, but there's then let's just say it's a TSC and CTC dinner.
Okay.
That's a bit exclusive. I'll try and make that not sound too exclusive. Because no doubt we will discuss TSC-ish things.
The calendar link is in the chat. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
How do I like subscribe to this thing?
Oh, I forget now.
I guess like the plus button. Never mind. We're good.
I'll just note out that board meetings are listed on there as I think the last Monday of every month, something like that, because that's what was once said, but they don't actually stick to that. So it's the best we got.
Yeah, we also line them
They-
up for various events and stuff like that. For
Yeah.
2017, we're going to have a list of all of the first half of the year's board meetings go out in December, so I could give that to you once we have it.
Okay. Any other business before Q&A?
I did want to say, just as a heads up, because I haven't been able to update since I keep missing the meetings, but the board is given another week to review the proposal for inclusivity working group that I worked on. I was trying to give them some time for input, and then I'm going to be introducing it back to the TSC, and that deadline should be November 27th, so watch for that. And then also, in case people haven't been paying attention, that the Collaborator Summit as well as the Code and Learn issues are pretty hashed out right now, but we're definitely looking for more of the working groups to give input on if they want to have meetings specific to their working group there. There's instruction in that issue in the, I believe it's the Node.js/Summit repo. And yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Now let's move to Q&A from anyone that's on the live stream. Do we have anyone on the live stream, Jeremiah?
Yeah, there's a few people watching.
Okay, so if anyone there would like to ask any questions or have anything to say about TSC stuff, please speak up. I think best place to comment is in the live stream comments. And we'll give it a minute to get in sync with that.
Nothing so far, except for lots of keyboard.
That's me, sorry.
Do we have anything to discuss afterwards in private?
I don't believe so. So we've talked about next meeting. Aside from that, we'll meet again in 2 weeks following Node Interactive. So that's it for now. And thanks for joining. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Call recording off.